I got to see about an hour's worth of Tennessee spring practice on Tuesday, and I'm telling you, there's a freshman that we're not talking about that's going to be a stud. Who is it? That and more. It's your Wednesday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, good Wednesday morning, everybody. Welcome to Locked On Vols, where it is your first listen every single day. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Eric Cain. Thank you so much for being here, where you can watch, you can listen, you can subscribe, and download everything for free wherever you get your podcasts, and of course, on the YouTube channel where you can subscribe to Locked On Vols. We've got a fun show coming up. I saw an hour's worth of spring practice on Tuesday. I'm going to tell you who I saw and who looked good in segment one. Ryan Schumpert talking a little Tennessee hoops, baseball, spring practice, whatever we want to discuss in segment two. And Josh Ward Wednesday in segment three, getting us set for Tennessee and St. Peter's coming up on Thursday in the NCAA Tournament. So what did I see from Tennessee football spring practice in practice number two? First and foremost, the guy threw, again, there's one practice in the spring session and one practice in fall camp that we get to see 9 periods worth, which is about 55 minutes. Every other practice that we get to see in camp-like settings is just period 0 through 2, which is period 0 is stretching, period 1 is individual, and period 2 is like a little bit more of individual and teamwork. My point is we don't get to see a lot. But, I'm coming off the one in spring practice where we get to see an hour's worth of spring practice. And so I got a lot of things to tell you. And again, it's, in the season, we don't even get to see practice. So it's really, really cool when we get to see an hour's worth. But through the minimal, first 2 days, I really feel like a freshman that we're not talking about has just been jumping off the page. He's a guy that during the recruiting process was overshadowed by another guy in his position that is very worthy and who I think is going to be a stud and a 5-star Mike Matthews. But Braylon Staley easily has been probably one of the most impressive freshmen so far, at least in my eyes, and from what you hear around coaches and everybody around the program. Again, it's just the first 2 days of spring practice. But he is running good routes. He's made a couple of really, really good catches. He's getting a whole lot of work behind Squirrel White in the slot, so he's getting tons of reps. Watch out for Braylon Staley. I think he's going to be a player for Tennessee. I'm not saying he's going to make a huge difference this year, but I've been really impressed with Braylon Staley so far to begin spring practice. I wanted to get that out in the open. But some takeaways that I had from spring practice number 2. A couple more guys I want to note for injuries that we didn't really discuss on yesterday's show, but I'll kind of recap the whole injury report. Brew McCoy, Peyton Lewis, Elijah Herring, they're out. Nathan Laycock, Javonte Spraggins, Messiah Reddick, Andre Carrick, they are out for spring. Arian Carter, Christian Charles, they're out for spring. Brian Grant is limited with a foot injury, so he's kind of day-to-day. Cooper Mays, on Tuesday he was there. He was going through practice and everything, but again, it's one of those situations where it's like, put him in bubble wrap and let's roll him out there for game number 1. He's somebody you can't afford to have an ankle turned or any type of injury during spring practice. So he was there, he was coaching, he was helping, he was in his helmet, and he was going through some indy, but it was a whole lot of Vice and Lang snapping the football with the first team offensive line, which is a good thing. It is a good thing because you got to find a true backup center and a starting point for your center in 2025. Again, 2 practices. There's a lot of injuries right now. There's a lot of guys not participating. So the rotation or the 1s and the 2s, they don't mean an awful lot. Plus, your first scrimmage of spring is on Wednesday of next week. And that second day or that day right after the first scrimmage of any camp setting, we call it moving day. It's when you look up at the depth chart, you were there, you were at this spot on this day, and then you played your first scrimmage, and then you're at this spot. You move up or you move down. It's called moving day. And so this rotation is likely going to change. These groups are likely going to change after the first spring scrimmage next Wednesday. But here's where you were. Here's what I saw out there from the second spring practice. On the offensive line, again, Javonte Spraggins is out. Cooper Mays was limited yesterday. You've got a lot of guys who were not participating in spring practice. So here's the offensive line. Your 2 tackles, Lance Hurd at left tackle, John Campbell at right tackle. Your 2 guards, Dane Davis, who's the swing man, who's going to play every position on the offensive line before it's said and done. He was at left guard on Tuesday. Jackson Lampley was at right guard on Tuesday. And then Vice and Lang was snapping the football. That is not what the offensive line is likely going to look like, the starting 5. Come game one, of course, you have Cooper Mays, Javonte Spraggins in there. We'll see about left guard. But that's what Tennessee's working with up front right now. The second group, again, Messiah Reddick's out. You've got Andre Curick is out. You got a lot of injuries on the up. Brian Grant is not practicing. So it was a lot of inexperience on the second team offensive line on Tuesday. Jesse Perry, true freshman left tackle. Trevor Duncan, converted defensive lineman at right tackle. Get him all the reps he can possibly take. That's not a bad thing. Sham Umarov, who's a tackle, trying to win the guard competition, so he's practicing at guard right now. He was at left guard. Aiden Bustles at right guard, and William Satterwhite, another true freshman, was at center. Those are your two working offensive lines right now, so a lot of inexperience there, but again, spring practice is the time to just rep and get them at least some practice experience. Defensive line groups, again, Rodney Gardner plays 10 to 13 guys, so a lot of these guys would all play in the same game. But first group out there at the Leo spot was James Pierce, and then it was Omar Norman Lott, Maury Thomas, and then Dominic Bailey. Second group, Joshua Josephs at Leo, Elijah Simmons, Bryson Eason, Tyree West. Third group, Caleb Herring at Leo, David Hobbs, Jackson Moy, Jason Jenkins. Tyree Weathersby was also mixing and matching in there, and a couple others. Very deep is this Tennessee defensive line, and that's going to be a strength this year. At linebacker, no Arian Carter, no Elijah Herring. You say goodbye to Aaron Beasley. So, again, a lot of opportunity for some young guys with some guys missing in action this spring. First group, Keenan Peely, Caleb Perry. Second group, Jeremiah Thielander, Jalen Smith. Third group, Ben Bolton and Edwin Spillman, a true freshman. In the secondary, here's how the first group was on Tuesday. Jermon McCoy at corner, Ricky Gibson at corner, Andre Turrentine, Will Brooks at safety, and Jordan Thomas at star. The second group, Jalen McMurray and Jordan Matthews were your corners. John Slaughter, Jacoby Thomas were your safeties. Boo Carter was your nickel. And other notables who rotated in, Christian Conyer at cornerback, Caleb Beasley at cornerback, Christian Harrison, a little bit at safety and star, Marcus Gorey was at cornerback, and there's some cross-training back there. I think Boo Carter got some reps at safety as well. A lot of people were like, well, Will Brooks, starting safety with the ones. What are you talking about? Well, think about this, guys. The former walk-on, I think he's still a walk-on. Pre-NIL, he'd probably be a scholarship player now. But, I mean, Will Brooks, the guy that Tim Banks trusts, he knows the system better than anybody in the secondary right now, and he played a little bit for Tennessee last year. So it's no shock to see that he's out there with the ones on day 2 of spring practice. Again, chances for Jacoby Thomas and John Slaughter to take a spot from him and Andre Turrentine as spring practice goes on. So those were kind of the rotations. Wanted to jot those down there and let you know. It's just a starting point. That was on Tuesday. Got to see some one-on-ones. Really, really cool to see. Dante Thornton won a route against Ricky Gibson on a slant. Ethan Davis won a route against Andre Turrentine on a slant. Caleb Webb won a route against Jermon McCoy on a comeback. Braylon Staley won a route against Boo Carter on a slant. Jordan Thomas broke up a pass intended for Squirrel White on a slant. That was a really nice play. Christian Harrison won over Braylon Staley on a skinny post. Holden Stays did a really nice job of utilizing his body and making adjustments on the fly and kind of boxing out and being kind of a basketball player out there. I noticed that a couple of times. Chris Brazzell, really good takeoff off the line of scrimmage. He's going to be a player. Chaz Nimrod went up and reeled in a catch kind of high up there in the rafters. I thought he looked good in yesterday's practice as well. A lot of one-on-one attention for Tim Banks with some of the members of the secondary. Quarterbacks, Nico easily looks the best right now. Was throwing precision passing on the rollouts the other day and routes on air. I thought Jake Merklinger kind of struggled in that regard, but again, he's still kind of getting his toes wet. There was a lot to see, a lot more to see than I could possibly write down and jot down, but it was good practice, and I was excited to be out there. I like this Tennessee team. It's a lot of newcomers, a lot of transfers, a lot of true freshmen, early enrollees. It's very, very raw and very, very sloppy right now. Not to say that the practice crisp isn't crisp and what the coaches want, but my point is they got a long way to go, and that's okay because it is March the 20th right now, and you can afford yourself a little bit of time. But that was some of the notes that I had from Tennessee spring practice number 2 from Tuesday morning. They'll be back out there on the practice field come Thursday morning following an off day here today. When we come back, we'll talk with Ryan Schumpert of Rocky Top Insider. That's coming up next when he joins us here on Locked On Vols. Is your bracket already busted? Those playing games, right? Tired of the same old daily fantasy grind where you make a roster, you cross your fingers and hope for the best, or losing on the last leg of your pick'em entry? Introducing Better Together, the first cooperative daily fantasy platform where teamwork triumphs talent and you can play with your friends, not against them. Pick more or less on real-time player stats, strategize with your partner to boost your odds, and climb the leaderboard together. So grab a friend and join the social daily fantasy sports movement today. Again, others familiar with experiencing existing daily fantasy sports players with a social twist, you can play with your friends. It provides a sense of camaraderie, enhances the social experience of watching sports. It makes you realize that DFS is not fun alone, but like a lot of other things, it's better when you're doing it together with some friends, and that's what Better Together is all about. So go check it out today. Download Better Together now from the App Store. Sign up using the promo code Locked On for a chance to win your share of over $1,000 in cash prizes. Remember the code Locked On, because winning alone is fun, but it's better together. Ooh, that's a really, really, really great call to action there with Better Together. Go check it out. And I want to tell you about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. What brings home the winning trophies also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and leveled up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, and LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts to choose from for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money is back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive today at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Ryan Schumpert of Rocky Top Insider. He's coming up next. Hey, I want to welcome in my buddy Ryan Schumpert from Rocky Top Insider, friend of the program, and is going to talk a little Tennessee hoops, Tennessee basketball, Tennessee baseball, football, spring practice, whatever the conversation brings. Do want to ask you about Tennessee's draw in the Midwest region. What do you like? What do you dislike? And Tennessee's about ready to begin this journey. A late night against St. Peter's on Thursday at 9:20.
I think I like most of Tennessee's draw. I mean, from a one seed standpoint, I never saw one projection that had them as the 2 seed in the West. So that never seemed to play. So if you take out North Carolina, I think Purdue is the next best 1 seed that you'd want from Tennessee's standpoint. I think UConn's the best team in the country. Houston and Purdue, you could kind of go either way, but Purdue's shown some struggles to get to that Elite Eight game. And to me, it's kind of a dance with the devil situation. So I like that. I think the first weekend draw is pretty good too. There's some things I don't like about the matchup with St. Peter's, but at the same time, this is a team that was, I think, the 5 seed in the MEAC conference tournament, went 19-13. Tennessee's favored by 20 points. Nothing too much to be worried about. And then you look, obviously, it's 3 potential opponents Tennessee could see in the second round. I think from a matchup standpoint, Texas is the 7 seed that they match up pretty well with. I think Virginia is probably the worst at-large team in the entire field. And then Colorado State presents some issues for sure. But it's not a matchup I feel like is terrible for Tennessee by any means. Where what I don't like about it is that potential matchup with Creighton in the Sweet 16. This is a Creighton team that plays a slow pace. We've seen teams like that hurt Tennessee this year. They're very balanced offensively. 3 guys that average over 17 points a game. And then they have the 7-2 guy and Ryan Kalkbrenner, which obviously we've seen big men give Tennessee issues this year. Kalkbrenner's a little bit different. He's more like Jonas Adu in that he's slender. So I don't think he's going to push Adu around. I think Adu will be able to hold his own on the defensive end in a potential matchup. But what Kalkbrenner does defending the rim is just fantastic. And I think that would be a game where Tennessee would struggle to get a lot of the baskets. So a little long-winded there, but overall I like the draw. And Creighton, the one kind of thing that is not, I don't think it's a great matchup for Tennessee.
Yeah, you kind of took us through, the first couple of rounds there, way down the road. If it gets to that, I mean, Tennessee would have to square off against Purdue most likely. And it's a team that Tennessee's already lost to this year, but I mean, certainly knows, it held its own, certainly knows, what that team is capable of and what it can do to kind of exploit some of the weaknesses there. If it were to come down to that for a second matchup of the season, what do you like about Tennessee against Purdue?
Well, I think there's the fact that Tennessee, I think, is not that JP Estrella or Cade Phillips have become huge parts of this team, but you're just further along in their development because I think Estrella especially would have to play in that game. I like that aspect of it. I like the aspect of it that I think Zach Edey there's a good chance he gets officiated a little bit different in the NCAA tournament compared to how he did, and if not the regular season as a whole, certainly in that Big Ten or in the Big Ten play and Big Ten tournament. So I like all that stuff. I think Tennessee, from a guard standpoint, Braden Smith's a lot better. I don't think Fletcher Lawyer is going to go through 27 points again like he did in that first meeting. He's a solid player, but nothing like that. And I just think Dalton Knecht, too, is a completely different player, a much better player, much more complete player on the offensive end now than he was early in the season.
It's dance time, so I mean, this is what you prepare for all season long. This is what you play for and position yourself for, and now here it is. Having said that, because of some of the struggles shooting wise for Santiago Vescovi, could you see maybe a reduction of minutes potentially with Santi, and maybe up the minute to Jemai Meshack or something like that, or is it just a game by game flow of the game, and this is what got you here? Let's see what happens.
I think it's very much a flow of the game situation, and I don't think you have Vescovi, sharpied into as many minutes as you would have expected at the start of the year in certain matchups, much like kind of the Alabama game was, or a matchup with Colorado State and Isaiah Stevens would be this way, where it would call for a lot of Jemai Meshack in trying to defend an elite perimeter player. And certainly if it's a game where Jordan Gainey's shooting well, I think you'd see Jordan Gainey take a lot of Santiago Vescovi's minutes, but I don't think just necessarily set in stone going into the game. That I would always work to get Meshack more minutes. I think I feel like I leave every game thinking he doesn't play enough. But he's not just going to take an overwhelming amount of Vescovi's minutes. It would have to be kind of a by committee thing. And certainly Jordan Gainey has been a really streaky player. So I don't think you just pencil in Gainey to a huge minute increase or anything like that.
So it all starts against St. Peter's, the 2 versus the 15 in Charlotte. That's coming up tomorrow. So looking forward to that and your coverage on that. Let's shift gears here, talk a little Tennessee football. Spring practice, 2 practices in the books right now. We got to see a whole lot of practice on Tuesday. I know it's early. I mean, I went through a bunch of the stuff that I observed in segment number 1, but at the end of the day, it's literally March the 20th. What are some things that have jumped out to you, though, over the first 2 days of spring practice?
Well, I think it's a lot of just what you see from physically how people look. And Nico, to me, looks bigger in the upper body even than he did back into 2 months ago in the bowl game. At first look at some of the newcomers. I mean, Lance Hurd is just a mountain of a man. I mean, he 100% look. I wrote it in our takeaways, I guess, on day number 1 on whatever that would have been Monday, where it's like, yeah, you can see why this dude was a 5-star recruit.
I think sorry to cut you off, but like in the Monday night chat the other night of VolQuest, I think somebody grabbed a screen grab of Hurd or something. It was a very unflattering photo, and they were like, any concern about him? Is he not in shape? The dude looked incredible when I saw him the other day, so I agree with you. He looks every bit as like a 5-star from a couple of years ago.
No doubt, and it's funny because I had the same. Usually when I'm taking notes, I'm jotting down numbers. So I had 53 watching the defense line. I thought Davian Hobbs looks bigger, a dude I could really see having a breakout season. Then I go over to the offensive side, and 53 again, the same number for Lance Hurd I jot down. And then some of the freshmen, Edwin Spillman, I really think looks the part. Braylon Staley, I don't think I was necessarily acquainted with his size. He's a little bit smaller than I thought, but really shifty. Looks like a really good route runner, and the little bit you can tell from routes on air. So those are a couple of guys that have stood out, and obviously got to see a little bit of some semblance of a pecking order on Tuesday with some of these rotations, but it's so early in spring, and obviously none of that stuff, as we've learned in the past, is really anything set in stone or definitive, but always interesting to look at some of that.
Yeah, as I mentioned in segment number 1, it's a starting point, and that Thursday after next Wednesday's first scrimmage, it'll be moving day. I mean, the up and down the depth chart for sure. Last thing, we'll shift gears. Is the Tennessee baseball season over after the series loss at Alabama?
No, it's not, and it's...
You sure?
It's crazy to see some people didn't learn from last season, and not to overreact to some stuff, but no, I mean, it was a disappointing opening weekend. I think mainly from the standpoint of Tennessee, you take game 1, and you have Drew Beeman, albeit a lesser A.J. Russell from a pitch count standpoint. You have A.J. Russell and Nate Snead remaining. So it was disappointing. Tennessee made some uncharacteristic mistakes in that Saturday game that we really haven't seen a ton this year that kind of cost them. And then certainly the pitching depth and that question kind of reared its ugly head to a degree on Sunday. So there's question marks with this team, which we knew coming into SEC play. They needed to me, get some of the middle to bottom of the lineup to be a little more consistent, but I think they will. And I'm still really high on this team. And believe it or not, losing 2 out of 3 games on the road against a top 15 team in SEC play in mid-March isn't going to be the end of the season.
I'll take your word for it, all right? I'll take your word for it. He is Ryan Schumpert over at Rocky Top Insider, covering all things Tennessee. His favorite time of the year right now is spring practice because he doesn't have anything going on, and so going over there to watch meaningless football practices and stretching. But where can we follow more of your work, and what do you got coming up this week with basketball?
Yeah, so you can follow me on X at rshump00. Find all our stuff on X as well at Rocky Top Insider and then rockytopinsider.com. We'll have plenty of content. Jack Foster will be holding down stuff with the baseball series. Hopefully I'll be back for Game 3 on Sunday. And then obviously everything you need to know on Tennessee basketball. I guess we'll be out at the time of publishing on Wednesday morning. I'll have a feature coming out on Zakai Ziegler and kind of his growth from a shooting guard and a point guard's body to a true point guard. So make sure to go check that out.
Be looking forward to that. Ryan, appreciate it as always, man. Thanks so much.
Yeah, of course.
I want to tell you about our friends over at Nissan. March Madness Bracket Highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week we're picking the team that stands out, and this week we got 3 different teams kind of entering the NCAA tournament that really kind of remind us of our friends over at Nissan. Let's take the UConn Huskies for a moment. Be described as an Armada, top-seeded team, hardcore as they get out there. No wonder they landed the overall top seed in the NCAA tournament. They're one of the favorites to win it all, despite 4 of the 6 Power 6 conference champions standing in their way in the East region. Tough, like an Armada. Auburn Tigers, they're a Pathfinder. Thrilling to watch. Really created a lane for themselves after claiming the top spot in the SEC tournament championship, trying to make a run into the NCAA tournament. And then, of course, you got the Oregon Ducks. They remind me of a Nissan Rogue. Obviously surprised us with a powerful performance in the final Pac-12 tournament, punching their ticket to the big dance. They say win life, go Rogue. That's exactly what the Ducks have done here. Take on the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada, and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. As we do every single Wednesday right here on Locked On Vols, we welcome on Josh Ward for a segment we call Ward Wednesday. Josh, co-host of Josh and Swain on 99.1 The Sports Animal. Josh, Tennessee is the number 2 seed in the Midwest. Do you like the draw for the Volunteers as they begin their NCAA tournament journey tomorrow night? Late tomorrow night. By the way, 9:20 Eastern Time tip. You know that's not going to start till 10 o'clock. Are you ready?
No, I'm not. I've complained publicly on social media, on the radio.
Made a difference?
No, I sent a couple of emails to the NCAA asking if there was a chance they could flip the games, have the Texas game be the second one of the night because you have the play-in team that has to travel. I made the case. No response, surprisingly. They have not messaged me back. I think it's a good draw for Tennessee. We'll see what happens next week. Next week's games aren't guaranteed. Like Creighton's a tough draw if you play Creighton. Not guaranteed to be there. To get to the Sweet 16, Tennessee should feel really good. Obviously, the Vols should beat St. Peter's. And then Texas, Virginia, or Colorado State, the conversation going in unknown, Tennessee could look at all 3 of those teams and say, we can play with any of them. So I think Tennessee should love where it is in the first weekend, and then we'll see next week. There was not going to be a number 1 seed where you would say, all right, that's going to be an easy game. So you get to Sweet 16. If Tennessee can advance to the Elite 8, it's going to be tough, but to get to that point where you just want to be in those games, the Vols are in a good spot.
Everybody saw the first round matchup with St. Peter's. Remembers that Elite 8 run it went on, was it 2 years ago? They all run together for me.
2 years ago.
Why should the Volunteers and why should Tennessee fans not fear the Peacocks this year?
Because they are 2 very different teams, and I don't just mean that, well, that was 2 years ago. They have a different coach. They have a completely different roster. They have 1 player that remains. It's a team that Tennessee needs to respect going in.
Yeah.
But if you look at KenPom rankings, for example, that's one metric to gauge how good a team is. That St. Peter's team 2 years ago finished the season ranked just outside the top 100. This year's team going into the NCAA tournament is ranked 187th. For a comparison, the team ranked 1 spot behind St. Peter's is Vanderbilt, which went 9-23 in the SEC. So of course, Tennessee should take St. Peter's seriously because it's an NCAA tournament game. But even if Tennessee has some kind of issue within the game, the two teams are not close. So there is no way Tennessee should lose this game, and I don't think there is a way. I think Tennessee will advance pretty easily.
Tennessee's going to open up in Charlotte. We'll play the game Thursday night, and of course, if one happens Saturday, which we anticipate happening. Good news for Tennessee. I feel like a lot of Tennessee fans will travel over the mountain and go and hopefully stay for the weekend in Charlotte.
Yeah, there'll be a good Tennessee crowd in Charlotte. Geographically, to open up the tournament, I think that's some kind of advantage for Tennessee. If the Vols were playing this slate out in Washington, like we're seeing Alabama and Auburn have to go travel, I'd still say, hey, it's a good draw for Tennessee in terms of the competition, but it doesn't hurt to be right over there in Charlotte where Tennessee fans will be to cheer on the Vols and trying to get to the Sweet 16. So that helps. I think overall it's really good. Like, Texas, if Texas is the opponent on Saturday, Texas is a fine team. I think it's one of the more disappointing teams this year. So that's a team that should not create any kind of concern for Tennessee. So where the Vols will be in trying to get to next week is a really good spot for Rick Barnes' team.
Give me some of your big picture takeaways from the bracket this year. Doesn't necessarily have to be Tennessee related. I just, when I look at the bracket, I mean, there's a number of things we can pick to. It's never going to be perfect. I recognize that, but again, just another example of how the SEC tournament specifically just doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all. Tennessee a couple of years ago, Auburn this year. Auburn, a 4 seed having to go across the country. It's ridiculous. And it's playing on Thursday night. I mean, again, it's never going to be perfect, but you see an example like this, every couple of years or every year at least, and it just makes you really shake your head. Yeah,
I agree. Auburn is playing Yale on Friday, so they do get that separation. But gotcha. I agree with everything you just said about, okay, so they're a top 10 team in the net and Ken Palm, and they win the SEC tournament. And I think they're really good. They're top 10 in offense and defense, and the reward is to go out to Washington in that region. UConn can be asking the same question. Wait a minute, we're the top team. We're the best team in the country, defending champs, and you give us the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the SEC tournament champs in our region. They're not going to play all of those teams, but that's the draw of the region going in. I've seen it brought up that we have a committee which is in place, and we debate every year what they should be doing, when really we could just be taking odds makers and a few analytics guys, and they could probably seed more appropriately. And I think that's totally true. There's also the made-for-TV aspect. Eric, of course, there's a reason that Texas A&M and Nebraska are playing in both the men's and women's tournaments. It can't just be a coincidence that happens right after A&M hires Nebraska's AD. The Tennessee-Texas second-round matchup possibility, Rick Barnes joked, yeah, I thought it'd be Texas or Clemson, for the second round, just because you'd get that storyline to go with it. So I don't think it's worth overreacting toward when we look at the bracket and how they put it together. But teams like St. John's and Indiana State had legitimate gripes for not being in the tournament when they looked at some of the teams that were chosen.
Was catching a little bit of Josh and Swain. I guess it was Tuesday afternoon on my ride home, and I heard your cohort, VFL Jason Swain, not necessarily make the case. I think it was a question in the text box. Correct me if I'm wrong, but sitting Santiago Vescovi, at least not in the starting lineup, still getting his minutes, and starting Jemai Meshack. Are you pro this move or against this move if that were to happen?
Well, and Swain did make the case. He made the case on Monday. We had another call on Tuesday saying that he thought that should happen. And then in the text box, we had really a split opinion of people who sent in messages, didn't like the idea of messing with the lineup at this time of the year. Yeah. None of the responses really seemed to be about how that would affect Santi. It was more about just the idea of tinkering or making changes.
Because, at this time, point. I think he's, 1 for 15 his last couple of games. It's
close to that.
I understand.
1 of 13, something like that.
Yeah, I understand. It's more about not messing with chemistry, what got you here. But at the end of the day, I heard Swain say this. If you got a receiver that's dropping every pass, you're not going to run him out there every time, right?
Mm-hmm. So as Swain made his case over the last couple of days, and the idea has just been brought up and talked about, I don't think it's a terrible idea if you believe everybody is on board with it. If Santi sees the idea, like I would almost, if you're talking about a perfect scenario to make the move, you'd almost want Vescovy to come and say, hey, Jahmai's giving us great energy. He's doing great things. Why don't we shake things up? We've talked about, somewhat joking about, Vescovy being another coach on Tennessee's team, especially after they caught him on camera drawing something up on the board. But like going in, I would not probably make the move myself. If Rick Barnes were to make that change, then I would get it. I don't think it would hurt Tennessee. The biggest thing I agreed with was, well, if you want to do it, you can afford to do it against St. Peter's and see how it goes. But, what if it goes poorly? You're just going back to the same lineup, your original lineup, I guess, in the second round, and how does that go? So I would lean toward not making that move, but there are benefits that can come with it. If it provides some kind of spark for Santi, he comes in 3 to 4 minutes into the game against maybe some second lineup guys for the opposing side, that could give him some kind of advantage. I do want to make one thing clear from what Swain said, and what I think should be discussed in the idea is that his minutes would not necessarily change. Yeah. The structure of when those minutes are played early on in the game is what would be different.
We're about 9 minutes in this interview, but I can't say goodbye without asking you your thoughts on spring football practice. Got going earlier this week. Yep. Been over there, saw 9 periods on Tuesday morning. That was fun. Won't ever see that again until one day in fall camp, and then back to seeing stretches. Overall thoughts on what we've seen, what you've read from guys like me. Thoughts on Tennessee opening spring practice here. Nico era, I mean, it is now officially here. He's the leader of this football team.
I think one of the most intriguing storylines, maybe number one, is the newcomers and what they will be able to add to Tennessee's football team. Lance Hurd, what he can do at left tackle. Chris Brazzell, what he can do at wide receiver. Some of those freshmen like Mike Matthews and Braylon Staley and Boo Carter on defense, who are really impressive athletically. What do they look like right now, and what can they take out of this spring to be able to add to what Tennessee's going to try to do this fall? And there are other guys that maybe don't get as much attention, like Jermod McCoy at cornerback, who I think is really important for what Tennessee's going to be, because cornerback and the secondary are big questions heading into this upcoming year. Tennessee played a lot of guys over the last 2 seasons that I think fans wanted to replace. And their reasons for maybe wanting to replace those guys were justified in some cases, but you still have to replace them. And the question is, who are you going to replace them with at safety? And are those corners who we think will probably lead the way, Ricky Gibson and Jermod McCoy, are they going to be ready to go play at a high level in the SEC? So Tennessee brings back a lot of guys, a lot of veteran leadership, especially on the offensive and defensive lines. But I think the new faces, and Nico counts in that conversation, taking over officially as the starter at quarterback, I think is the biggest storyline for Tennessee right now.
Got the Josh and Swain newsletter every Friday morning. I would imagine you're still going to do that. It'll be a late night Thursday. We got the Josh and Swain newsletter Friday mornings when we can read up on stuff throughout the week, plus important guests and topics on your show, right?
Yeah, excuse the typos. Sign up at joshandswain.com so that you can count how many writing mistakes I make after staying up for the Tennessee St. Peter's game on Thursday night. But it's free. Love putting it together each week. Appreciate the feedback that we've been able to get. Appreciate you sharing that for everybody. And every day from 12 until 3. We're talking a lot of basketball right now, but a lot of football. Swain talk this week about the importance of getting work done. You have guys that came in with a lot of excitement, some of those names I just mentioned, but a lot of pressure, and the leaders need to step up to make sure all the work is put in for Tennessee to match its expectation this fall.
You can sign up for the Josh and Swain newsletter. There is a link in the description of this show right now and every show, and you can listen to Josh and Swain, 99.1 The Sports Animal, noon to 3 weekdays on the Sports Animal. Josh, as always, thanks so much, man.
You got it. Thanks, Eric.
All right, that is Josh Ward for the segment we call Ward Wednesday, each and every Wednesday right here on Locked On Vols. Did you know that Josh Ward used to run this podcast, and then he couldn't find anybody else in the world to take over when he got too busy, and that's how I got it. But Josh Ward, he is a Locked On Vols, and Josh, I know you're still there. What was it called before? What was it called before Locked On Vols?
Yeah, it was part of SEC Country, and when that went away, I took it solo and called it Rocky. What did I call it? I don't know. And then it became like
Rocky Top Talk, maybe.
I don't think so. Rocky Top Talk, I think, was SB Nation's. So Rocky Talk, maybe. I don't. It was short lived, and then it became Locked On Vols. David Locke gave me the opportunity, and you said I ran it. Before I ran it into the ground,
Yeah.
you took over and saved it.
All right, that's enough from him. We'll say goodbye to him again. He couldn't even remember the name of his own show, but point is, he's an OG, and we have him on Locked On Balls every single Wednesday. Appreciate you guys for joining us. Thanks so much to Josh Ward, for Ryan Schumpert, for joining the show. We'll have more from Tennessee football spring practice on tomorrow's show. We'll get you set for Tennessee and St. Peter's and Tennessee's run to hopefully the first ever Final Four. We'll talk about all that and more coming up next on tomorrow's show. This is Locked On Balls.